My parents kicked me out at 17. Now they're demanding I pay for my sister's wedding. You won't believe how it ended. I never thought a single thank you post could set my entire life on fire. But that's exactly what happened when my best friend tagged me online after her wedding. 1 minute, I'm feeling proud of helping someone I care about have the wedding of her dreams, and the next, I'm dodging calls from people I haven't spoken to since the day they told me to pack a bag and get out. And yeah, that's not dramatic flair. That's exactly what went down. I was 17 when my mom sat me down at the kitchen table in our tiny brick house in Evansburg and told me God wouldn't accept a boy like me under her roof. She said it softly, like she was doing me a favor by not shouting. My dad never even looked at me, just stood in the corner with his arms crossed like he was watching a kid get expelled from school. They weren't interested in where I'd go. They didn't care that I had no job, no car, and nowhere to sleep. I crashed with whoever would take me in until eventually, by some miracle, my best friend Jesse's mom opened their door and gave me a shot at staying off the streets. Fast forward a decade later, and I've built a life from the ashes. I work in Montana now, running logistics for one of the busiest boutique wedding companies in the city. Every week is a new chaos parade. Flowers going missing, DJs ghosting the bride, thunderstorms rolling in 2 hours before the vows. But I've got it down to a science. I'm respected. People trust me. I've made real connections with vendors, artists, venue owners, the kind of people who remember your name when the rest of the world doesn't. So when Jessie, the one person who never gave up on me, said she was getting married, I knew I had to do something big. She deserved that much. No, she deserved more. She and her fiancé, Marcus, had been scraping together every spare cent for their wedding. I knew their original budget was tight, and they were ready to compromise just to make it happen. But I couldn't sit by and watch that. Not after everything Jessie had done for me. I started making calls. I reached out to a caterer I once helped when his kitchen had a plumbing disaster the day of a 300-guest wedding. He owed me, and he knew it. I contacted a florist I'd pulled strings for when she had 3 back-to-back events and was about to lose her mind. I even called the venue director who once locked himself out of his own estate grounds, and I had to break in, climb through a side window, and reset his entire alarm system before the guests arrived. Every single person I contacted came through, not just because they owed me, but because I had earned their trust over years of showing up when it mattered. By the time I finished, Jessie's entire wedding, originally a $25,000 event, was down to just under $4,500. It was insane. Even I couldn't believe it when I looked at the final spreadsheet. Venue? Covered. Catering? Deeply discounted. Photographer? Family rate. DJ? Half price. And threw in uplighting for free. Jessie cried when I showed her the final breakdown. Actual tears, like happy, stunned, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening tears. I don't think I've ever felt more proud of anything I've done, including graduating college or landing my first real job. This mattered. She mattered. Jessie's the kind of person who believes in giving credit where it's due, and I love her for it. But in this case, that credit came with a digital hand grenade. She posted a photo of us from the wedding, her in her dress, me in my suit, both of us laughing like idiots. The caption was long, heartfelt, and beautiful. She wrote about how I'd saved her thousands, how I'd done more for her than anyone ever had, how lucky she was to have me in her life. And she tagged me, which, normally, wouldn't be a big deal. But this time, it turned everything sideways. It only took 3 hours for my phone to start buzzing with a call from a number I barely recognized, but still somehow knew in my gut. My mother. I let it go to voicemail the first time. Same with the second. But by the third, I picked up, mostly out of morbid curiosity. She didn't even say hi. Didn't ask how I was doing. She went straight for the jugular. "Why did you help that girl instead of your sister?" she snapped, her voice sharp and brittle like glass under pressure. I blinked. I hadn't even known my sister was getting married. We hadn't spoken in over 6 years, not since she stood next to my parents and watched me get kicked out without saying a word. I told my mom I didn't owe her or my sister anything. That helping Jessie wasn't just about friendship, it was about loyalty and history. My mom, predictably, lost it. She accused me of abandoning family, of being selfish, of rubbing my success in their faces. She went off about how my sister, Amber, had always dreamed of a big wedding and how dare I help someone else make that happen when I wouldn't even answer her texts. Texts I never got, by the way. I hung up before she could spiral further, thinking that would be the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. Within hours, I had messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. A few uncles. Some weird, concerned texts from people who used to ignore me at family reunions. All of them suddenly acting like I was Satan because I had the audacity to use my own connections to help someone who actually gave a damn about me. Then Amber herself started calling. Her voicemails were something else. Half fake crying, half threats, all wrapped in a nice little bow of entitlement. She told me I was choosing strangers over blood, that she'd already told people I'd help, and now I was making her look bad. She dragged my dad into it, too, which was wild considering that man didn't even say goodbye the night I left. Jessie noticed the comments piling up on her post and texted me, worried she'd made things worse. I told her not to worry. She did nothing wrong. It wasn't her fault my family saw a shiny opportunity and came crawling out of the shadows like cockroaches when the lights come on. Still, I could feel it happening. That pressure, that guilt, the kind of manipulation only family can perfect. I could tell this was just the beginning. And knowing my family, I knew it would only get uglier from here. I thought the flood of calls and messages would slow down after I shut my mom down on the phone, but I seriously underestimated just how stubborn my family could be when they thought there was money on the table. It didn't matter that they hadn't reached out to me in almost a decade. The second they got it into their heads that I could somehow pull strings and get them a free wedding, they came at me like a swarm of locusts. Amber doubled down hard. She wasn't just calling now. She was texting, emailing, tagging me in posts, and even messaging people I worked with. One of my old coworkers, who I haven't seen in years, texted me out of the blue asking why my sister was posting about me refusing to help with her big day. I hadn't even seen the post yet, so when I checked her account, my jaw practically hit the floor. There it was. A full paragraph rant, complete with old childhood photos of us smiling like everything had always been sunshine and rainbows. She wrote about how heartbreaking it was that her own brother would turn his back on her during the most important time of her life. She said I had the power to fix everything, but chose not to because of some petty old grudge. The comments underneath were exactly what you'd expect. People who didn't know the first damn thing about our history piling on, saying things like, wow, how could he be so heartless, and family over everything. Reading it made my blood boil. Not just because it was manipulative, but because she twisted the story so completely. She made herself out to be the victim. And worse, some people believed her. I tried to let it go, but the next day, things escalated even further. I was at work, in the middle of organizing a last-minute vendor replacement for a bride whose baker had vanished into thin air, when I got called into my boss's office. Now, my boss isn't the kind of person who calls meetings lightly. She's efficient, keeps her head down, and trusts me to handle things. So when she told me to sit down, my stomach dropped. She said someone had contacted the company, claiming to be a family member of mine, and had accused me of misusing professional resources for personal gain. Apparently, Amber called the office and tried to convince my employer that I was offering deep discounts and deals unfairly, that if I helped one person, I should be required to help all family members equally. She even went as far as claiming I was making the company look biased and unprofessional. My boss, to her credit, told me she saw through it almost immediately. She said it sounded like a personal issue, not a professional one, and she shut it down without giving it another second of thought. But she also said she wanted to make me aware that any future disruptions like this could become a problem, not because I was in the wrong, but because people causing chaos from the outside could affect our reputation. I left her office numb with anger and embarrassment. My sister hadn't just tried to guilt-trip me. She tried to sabotage my job. She actually thought if she could put pressure on me through my employer, I'd cave and hand over everything she wanted. It wasn't just entitled. It was dangerous. I'd worked too damn hard for this career, for every connection, every recommendation, every inch of trust I'd earned over the years. And now she was using it as leverage. That night, I blocked her number. I blocked my mom too, just to stop the noise. But of course, they weren't done. Amber started posting again, even more aggressively than before. This time, she included screenshots of her previous messages to me, cropped perfectly to make it look like she was being sweet and reasonable. She left out the guilt tripping, the accusations, the emotional blackmail. It was pure manipulation, crafted to make her look like a heartbroken sister trying her best, and me look like a cold, selfish monster. My inbox blew up with even more messages, not just from strangers but from old friends, classmates, and even clients who had somehow stumbled across the posts. Some people were concerned, asking if everything was okay. Others were hostile, asking how I could be so cruel to my little sister when I had the ability to change her life with one phone call. It didn't matter that none of these people had been there for me when I was 17 and sleeping in a bus station. All that mattered was that now, I had something she wanted, and that made me the villain in her narrative. Things reached a new low when I got home from work one evening and found a padded envelope on my doorstep. At first, I thought it was something I ordered online, but when I opened it, I found a wedding invitation. Amber's wedding invitation. Handwritten on the back was a note in red ink that read, "You can still fix this. Don't make me expose everything." That line hit me like a punch in the chest. Expose what? What exactly did she think she had on me? I hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't hurt anyone, hadn't broken any laws. But I knew what she meant. She was threatening to keep dragging my name through the mud if I didn't cooperate. She was betting I'd crack under the pressure, that I'd finally break and give in to save face. And for a second, I almost did. Not because I felt guilty, but because I was exhausted. Completely worn out from fighting off the lies, the guilt trips, the emotional games. I sat on the floor of my apartment, invitation in one hand, letter in the other, wondering how much longer I could keep this up before something gave way. I had survived worse. I knew that. But something about this was different. It felt more personal than ever. She wasn't just reaching out to hurt me. She wanted to ruin me. The next day, I went to work and told my boss everything. Every detail from start to finish. She listened, nodded, and told me she'd already notified building security in case anyone tried to show up again. She said if it happened more than once, they'd escalate to legal action. I thanked her, feeling a mix of relief and dread. I didn't want things to go that far, but at this point, I didn't know if I had a choice. I spent the rest of the day with one eye on my phone, half waiting for another post or another voicemail. I couldn't focus. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I started second-guessing every decision I made, wondering if maybe I'd been too harsh, too stubborn. But then I'd remember what it felt like, being 17 and standing on that front porch with a garbage bag full of clothes while my parents locked the door behind me. I remembered what it felt like to call 10 different people, begging for a place to sleep. And I remembered Jesse, who never asked why, never hesitated, just cleared a space on the couch and told me I was home. And that's when the last of the guilt burned off. Amber didn't want a relationship. She wanted a transaction. She didn't reach out because she missed me or wanted to fix the past. She came crawling out of the woodwork because she saw an opportunity and thought I'd be dumb enough to fall for it. But I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I had a life. I had peace. And no amount of crying, scheming, or social media stunts was going to take that away from me. Not ever again. I kept telling myself the worst was probably over, that maybe Amber had run out of steam after trying every method short of smoke signals to guilt me into funding her wedding. But apparently that was a little too optimistic. I should have known better than to think someone like her would give up that easily. Entitled people don't quit when they're losing. They just change tactics, usually in the most obnoxious and public way possible. It started with a coworker texting me while I was mid-rehearsal for a small rooftop wedding in downtown Montera, saying my mom and sister were standing at the front desk asking to see me. At first I thought he was messing with me, because that didn't even sound real. But then he sent a photo from the building's lobby cameras, and sure enough, there they were. My mother standing stiff as a statue in some too formal church outfit, and Amber wearing an outfit that looked more appropriate for a social media live stream than a conversation with her estranged brother. I stared at that picture for a good 10 seconds trying to decide whether to disappear into the utility closet or just jump out the window. In the end, I walked out front because I knew if I didn't deal with it myself, they'd keep escalating until security had to drag them out screaming. The moment they saw me, Amber launched into a performance so theatrical it probably deserved a Tony nomination. She started sobbing. On cue, I swear. Crying about betrayal, about family bonds, about how I was turning my back on the people who raised me. My mom chimed in with a line about how she didn't raise me to be this cold, which is pretty rich coming from the woman who told me to leave with 2 hours' notice when I was 17. I tried to keep my voice low and my tone calm, mostly because I could see my boss watching from the hallway behind the front desk. I told them that this wasn't the place for this kind of conversation, that they needed to leave before they embarrassed themselves further. That, predictably, made things worse. Amber's voice got louder. Her gestures got more dramatic. She stepped closer, accusing me of destroying her big day, ruining her happiness, and making her feel like nothing. She even said, and I swear this is real, if you had a heart at all, you'd fix this before it's too late. I told her the same thing I'd said in the emails and voicemails and text messages I never answered. I wasn't going to help. I didn't know her anything, and if they really cared about me, they would have shown it before I was living out of a gym locker and sneaking into diners to warm up in winter. They stared at me like I had just slapped them across the face. But then, of course, Amber tried to spin it around. I'm here to make things right, she said, as if ambushing me at work in front of clients and colleagues was some kind of olive branch. I told them both that if they didn't leave immediately, I'd have building security escort them out. They didn't believe me until security actually showed up and asked them to go. Amber screamed something about me being heartless as they were led toward the elevators. I didn't even look back. The fallout from that little stunt hit the next day. There was a new post on Amber's social media. A picture of her red-eyed, obviously post-crying, with a caption that read, "He doesn't care. I tried. All I wanted was peace." The comments were a flood of sympathy from people who knew absolutely nothing about the truth. Friends of hers, extended relatives, random internet strangers, all calling me every version of a monster you can think of. My inbox filled up again. People asking me how I could treat my sister that way. Someone even sent a voice memo, calling me a disgrace to my family. I blocked, deleted, reported. Rinse and repeat. But it wasn't enough. Because Amber still had more to give, and she went bigger the next time. A few days later, as I was walking home from work, I saw a small group of people gathered outside my apartment building. It wasn't until I got closer that I saw Amber standing in the middle, holding a giant handmade sign with my name in huge letters. She was surrounded by what looked like her friends, and maybe a few of our cousins I hadn't seen since high school, all chanting something ridiculous about family values and betrayal. I couldn't believe it. My sister had literally staged a protest outside my building. She was standing there telling anyone who walked past that her cold, greedy brother was refusing to help with her wedding and that she had no other choice but to take it public. I walked right past her, ignoring the way they followed me, yelling things like, "Why won't you help your own blood? And do the right thing, man." I told her one more time that if she didn't leave, I'd call the cops, and she laughed in my face. Her friends had their phones out, recording the whole thing like they thought they were going to catch me having some kind of meltdown. But I didn't give them anything. I turned around and walked into the building, called the manager, told him what was happening. He said he was already on the phone with the police. 20 minutes later, the cops showed up. Amber cried, again, loud, exaggerated sobs like a toddler throwing a tantrum. But the officers weren't buying it. They gave her and her crew the option to leave or be cited for disturbing the peace. Thankfully, they left. After they were gone, I sat in my living room staring at the wall, just trying to process what the hell my life had turned into. I never wanted drama, never wanted attention. I just wanted to live in peace. But they weren't going to stop unless I did something. The next morning, I called a lawyer, told her everything, sent screenshots, call logs, copies of the threats. She didn't even hesitate. Said we had more than enough to file for a restraining order. That night, I saw yet another post from Amber. This one was the worst yet. She claimed I was trying to erase her from my life legally, and that it was the most painful betrayal a sister could endure. She added a GoFundMe link, Because of course she did, saying she needed help affording her wedding after being financially abandoned by her only brother. I stared at the page in disbelief. She was asking for donations from strangers because I wouldn't bankroll her fantasy. And the worst part? People were actually giving. Not a lot, but enough to make me question whether reality even existed anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't say anything. I didn't post a counter-narrative or try to explain my side. I let it sit, because now I had legal protection coming, and I wanted every single bit of this insanity on record. I was tired of playing defense. I was tired of giving second chances. Amber wanted a villain? Fine. Let her paint me that way. Just don't be surprised when the next chapter doesn't end the way she planned. I thought getting the restraining order would finally put an end to the chaos, or at least slow it down enough that I could start breathing normally again. But once again, I underestimated just how deep my sister's delusion ran. Most people, when served with a legal order, back off, even if just out of fear of consequences. But Amber? She treated it like a challenge. Like this was the dramatic twist in her self-produced soap opera where the misunderstood heroine had to overcome her evil brother's heartless betrayal. I didn't hear from her directly after the order came through, but it didn't take long for the next wave of insanity to hit me. 3 days later, I got an email at work that almost made me spill coffee across my desk. The sender? Someone I'd never spoken to in my life. The subject line? Let's talk like family. It was from her fiancé, a guy named Brent. I hadn't even realized she was still with someone, let alone engaged to a guy who was apparently just as unhinged. The email was long, weirdly polite, and filled with the kind of fake warmth you only hear from salespeople who pretend to care about your dog's health just to sell you a new vacuum. He said he'd heard there had been misunderstandings, and that he hoped we could find common ground before things got further out of hand. He wrote about how stressed Amber was, how difficult it had been watching her emotional decline, and how he believed I had the power to fix everything with just a few small contributions. I nearly laughed out loud when I got to that line, because it was so obvious he didn't care about peace. He wanted a check. He asked if I could assist with a few essentials, like the photographer, caterer, and venue balance. Essentials. As if I was the emergency ATM he could just tap for his big day. I don't know if he thought he'd sweet-talk me into feeling guilty, or if he was just that detached from reality. But either way, I didn't bother crafting some elegant response. I told him clearly, once, that I had no interest in speaking to him, no intention of paying for anything, and if he or Amber contacted me again, we'd escalate it through my attorney. Then I blocked him and moved on. I thought that would be it. One final desperate plea before the wedding actually happened, and they'd move on with their lives. But nope. Instead, he forwarded my email to my lawyer, claiming I was being hostile and unreasonable. My lawyer called me just to laugh about it. She said she'd seen some delusional stuff in her time, but this guy took the cake. He even tried to position himself as the peacemaker, the bridge between a broken family, while conveniently skipping over the fact that his fiancée had staged a protest outside my home and nearly got herself arrested. As the wedding date got closer, the drama on Amber's end intensified. She started posting cryptic messages about how money ruins relationships, how some people will never understand sacrifice, and how she refused to let bitterness ruin her joy. All clearly directed at me, all designed to make her look like the calm, long-suffering sibling while I was the cold-hearted monster hiding behind lawyers and silence. But I said nothing. I didn't engage. I kept every post, every message, every forwarded email. I wanted it all on file, in case we had to go even further legally. Then the day before her wedding, I got a call from one of the florists I work with. She was pissed. Told me someone claiming to be related to me had used my name to secure a discount for an event and then ghosted the final payment. I asked if the event was in Charleston. She said yes. My stomach dropped. Amber had been using my name, my reputation, to get deals from my contacts. And she wasn't paying them. I asked the florist to send me everything, emails, invoices, screenshots, so I could forward it to my attorney. Turns out she wasn't the only vendor. My friend Leo, who runs a DJ and lighting service, called me later that afternoon with the same story. He'd given a 50% discount because Amber said I was part of the planning team. She never even paid the deposit. He showed me the messages, and there it was in black and white. My name, casually dropped into the conversation like I'd been vouching for her the whole time. I felt sick, not just because she'd lied, but because she was dragging my career into her disaster. That night, I sent out a mass email to all my regular vendors and contacts, letting them know that under no circumstances should they accept bookings from Amber or anyone associated with her using my name. I explained the situation without going into too much personal detail and apologized if any damage had already been done. Most of them were sympathetic. A few were furious. A couple had already blacklisted her. One said she planned to sue if she didn't get paid within a week. The wedding day came and went. I didn't hear anything. No calls. No posts. No news. For about 5 days, I started to believe that maybe it was finally over. Maybe Amber got what she wanted and would finally stop spinning this fantasy that I was the villain in her sad little drama. But then Jessie, my best friend, the only real family I've ever had, called me late one night with a tone in her voice that instantly made my stomach tighten. She'd been on a call with one of her photographer friends, who'd worked a wedding in Charleston that weekend. He mentioned the bride had been scamming vendors using someone else's name, and that it had blown up during the reception when one of the decorators showed up demanding immediate payment or they'd start tearing down the centerpieces. The couple got into a screaming match right there on the dance floor. Guests left early. No one got paid. The venue owner was threatening to take them to court. Jessie asked if it was Amber. I didn't even have to answer. A few days later, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing one of the unpaid vendors. They weren't suing me, thankfully, but they were putting me on notice in case Amber tried to shift liability onto me. My lawyer jumped on it immediately, sending cease and desist letters to Amber and Brent, along with formal notices stating I'd had no involvement and that any further attempts to use my name would be considered fraud. We attached screenshots, emails, and evidence to make it airtight. Still, Amber couldn't help herself. She posted again. This time it was a picture of her wedding dress, with the caption, "Not what I dreamed of, but at least I had love." Comments poured in. People praising her for being strong. A few asking what went wrong. She responded vaguely, saying how sometimes the people closest to you want to see you fail, and not everyone can handle seeing you shine. Classic Amber. Always the victim. Always the tragic star of her own disaster movie. I didn't reply. I didn't message. I didn't do anything except sit on my couch that night, drink a cold beer, and feel the most unexpected thing, relief. Not because the drama was over. I knew better than to believe that. But because for the first time since this started, I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even embarrassed. I was just done. Utterly, completely done. I had survived worse. I had clawed my way out of worse. And if this circus proved anything, it was that I didn't owe a single damn thing to the people who left me behind. I thought maybe after the wedding disaster, after the vendors pulled out and the reception collapsed mid-slice of cake, Amber would finally leave me alone. I figured the humiliation of having her lies blow up in public would be enough to send her crawling back into the shadows where she came from. But it turns out I once again gave her way too much credit, because less than 2 weeks after that train wreck, she pulled out one final trick that made it crystal clear she hadn't learned a damn thing. It started when I got a call from my lawyer, who told me she'd just received an email from Brent, claiming I'd cost them their wedding by poisoning the industry against them. He went on for paragraphs about how I'd intentionally sabotaged their reputation, how I'd used my connections to block them from getting fair prices, and how I had weaponized my position to destroy what should have been the happiest day of their lives. He even tried to threaten legal action, like I was the one who'd pretended to be someone else to get free stuff. My lawyer handled it professionally, but when she read the message out loud to me over the phone, even she couldn't hide her disgust. She said they were grasping at straws, and that if they even tried to go near a courtroom, we'd bury them in receipts, screenshots, vendor testimonies, and enough legal weight to flatten every lie they'd stacked up. I told her I didn't want to hear from them again unless it was through a court summons. No more back and forth, no more warnings. We were done playing games. For a few days after that, things actually went quiet. Social media was silent. No more sad posts or cryptic quotes about family betrayal. No more GoFundMe links disguised as sob stories. It was like they finally ran out of fuel, or maybe they realized there was no one left to fool. Their following had dried up. The donations stopped. The people who once spammed my inbox with insults had moved on to their next outrage of the week. The silence was so unexpected it almost made me nervous. Then one afternoon, I got a notification from an old high school classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. He sent me a screenshot from Amber's private account, which I wasn't following, obviously. In it, she'd posted a new message, one that actually managed to surprise me, which by this point was rare. The post wasn't just another woe is me rant or a backhanded jab. It was a full-on rewrite of reality. In it, she claimed I'd cut ties with the family out of nowhere, that I'd always been jealous of her happiness, and that I'd launched a campaign to destroy her wedding. She painted herself as the brave survivor of my cruelty, saying she was working to rebuild her life after the trauma inflicted by someone who was supposed to love her unconditionally. Reading it didn't make me angry, not anymore. It made me sad, in a detached, watching a car crash from a distance kind of way. Because in her mind, she wasn't just right, she was righteous. She actually believed the mess she'd made was my fault. And no amount of truth, no pile of screenshots, no signed contracts from unpaid vendors was ever going to convince her otherwise. It was easier for her to live in a world where I was the villain than to admit she had burned every bridge she ever stood on. I didn't respond. I didn't text her. I didn't send a cease and desist this time. I just logged off, deleted the screenshot, and sat with the realization that sometimes closure doesn't come with an apology. It comes with finally losing interest in the apology you were never going to get. Life went on. My job picked up. I landed 2 big clients in the next month, both referrals from people I'd helped after the Amber fiasco, ironically enough. Turns out when you go through a nightmare publicly, people notice how you handle it. Some respected that I didn't engage. Some just wanted to work with someone who had survived a Category 5 family meltdown and still delivered luxury weddings on schedule. Either way, my work life only improved. Then something happened that truly shocked me. A few months later, I got a knock on my door in the middle of the afternoon. I looked through the peephole and saw my dad standing there, older than I remembered, thinner, wearing a coat that looked a size too big for him. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. When I let him in, he looked around my apartment like it was some kind of museum he didn't belong in. He sat down when I offered, didn't say a word for a long time. Then, finally, he looked me in the eye and said, "I think I made a mistake." That was it. No dramatic speech, no tears, no requests for forgiveness. Just that one sentence. And I believed him. But I didn't tell him it was okay. I didn't offer some perfect Hollywood reconciliation moment. I just nodded and said, "You did." Then I told him I was busy and walked him to the door. As he left, he said he hoped one day I'd be willing to talk again. I said maybe, and I meant it. But that didn't mean soon, and it didn't mean I was obligated. He left quietly, and that was the end of it. Amber never reached out again, not directly anyway. She tried to get sympathy a few more times online, but by then her posts weren't getting traction. People had moved on. The drama dried up without fresh fuel. Her wedding debt piled up. Vendors came for her one by one. I heard through a mutual connection that she and Brent split up not long after, and that she'd tried to launch some kind of coaching business that failed before it started. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just felt distance, the final kind. The kind that stays. It's strange how some people can occupy so much space in your head until one day they just don't. Not because they apologized. Not because anything was fixed. Just because you finally realize you're better without their noise. Jessie and I still talk almost every day. She said something to me not long ago that stuck with me. Sometimes it's not about winning. It's about walking away before you start losing pieces of yourself. And she's right. I lost a lot growing up. I lost my home, my family, my safety, and for years, I thought I had to earn those things back by being good, by being successful, by being useful. But the truth is, the only thing I ever needed was peace. And peace doesn't come from people who only show up when they want something from you. So if you're reading this and wondering whether it's okay to walk away from the people who broke you, yeah, it is. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you selfish. It means you finally learned to stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And that lesson? That's worth more than any wedding in the world.